Okay, welcome to my tutorial. I'm Kotaki Robert, and today I'm going to be talking about absolute advantage. So I'm going to be talking about absolute advantage. Absolute advantage. Now, this theory has many students confused. Sorry. This theory I'm talking about absolute advantage. And this theory has many students confused, and I don't know why, because this is a very easy theory. So I just want to make sure that all the students out there get to know that this is a very easy theory which was proposed by Adam Smith, one of the greatest economists this world has ever seen, in the year 1776. Adam Smith, in his publication in that same year, so publication which is named An Inquiry into the Nature and Wealth of Nations, he proposed this theory, and from it we could get the view that it states that if you are given two countries, if you are given two countries, two commodities, given two countries, and you're given two commodities using the same level of resources, using the same level of resources, comma, a country has absolute advantage if it can produce more output of both commodities than the other country. So a country produces more output of both commodities than the other country, then that country definitely has absolute advantage in the production of both commodities than the other country. So given two commodities being produced by two countries using the same level of resources, a country produces more output of both commodities than the other country. So we are going to take a look at an example, an illustration, and see if we can try and understand what this theory really looks at. So you'll forgive my drawings, the shapes they're looking, but still I just want to drive the point home. So I'm dedicating this video to A-level students in Uganda. So I'm going to basically use Ugandan examples. So let's say we're talking about Uganda. We're assuming two countries. So we have Uganda, and then we have Kenya, and we are assuming two commodities as well. So the two commodities we can use coffee, we can also use cotton. So given two countries, Uganda and Kenya, producing two commodities, coffee and cotton, and of course they're using the same level of resources. That's the assumption. One country produces more output of both commodities than the other country. So let us assume that Uganda is using, according to Adam Smith, he assumed that labor is the only factor of production or the only input. So of course, if you go back to your basic economics, talking about supply, if you use less costs of production, less costs definitely means more output. If you're using less costs, means more output. If you're using less money to produce something, if you're using less labor to produce something, if you're using less land, less capital to produce something, then it means you will produce more output than the other. So let us assume that Uganda is using 10 labor or 10 workers to produce coffee, and it is using 20 workers to produce cotton, and let us say Kenya needs to produce the same amount of coffee. Kenya needs 30 workers to produce the same output, and Kenya also requires maybe say 50 workers to produce the same output that is produced by 20 workers in Uganda of cotton. Then it means this, what we're talking about here, this is the labor input or the costs. We're assuming labor is our only cost which is incurred. So basing on this example, you can see that Uganda uses less costs of production in producing coffee, and it also uses less costs of production in production of cotton than Kenya. So basing on this, you can see from this scenario or this example one, you can see that given two countries producing two commodities using the same level of resources, a country produces more output of both commodities than the other country. So that means Uganda has absolute advantage in production of both cotton and coffee than Kenya. It has absolute advantage in production of coffee and cotton over Kenya. So I hope you understand that very well. And there is another scenario which not absolute but reciprocal. Some people get this confusing. Reciprocal absolute advantage. Reciprocal absolute advantage. Now we can have scenarios where you have one country being good at another and another one being good at the other. So let us assume this is not the case, so I'll remove this. Let us assume that okay, let this stand. So if say Uganda is better than Kenya, let's say Uganda is producing using 40 workers to make coffee, and Kenya is using 10 to produce this. So that means if you look at this example, it has changed. You find that Kenya is better here. In this circumstance, Kenya is using less costs to produce coffee, and Uganda is using less costs to produce cotton. So in this circumstance, that's when we refer to reciprocal. So reciprocal absolute advantage means one country is superior than the other in one commodity, and the other country is superior than the other in the other commodity. So not to be confusing, but this is just an extract from the theory, but absolute advantage is this. Absolute in its, if you have attended and properly understood your English lessons, the word absolute, on the other hand, is complete. So if I'm absolutely happy, I'm completely happy. If I'm completely better than you, I'm absolutely better than you. So that means Adam Smith was trying to tell us to look at if you're a country, what commodity do you have complete advantage in production over the other country? Produce that commodity, and definitely you'll have more gains from international trade. And some countries have adopted this into play. You find Canada, you find China, they have all adopted and embraced this theory, and they are reaping a lot of gains from it. So from this theory, there was a big limitation, because you can see that in the first circumstance, where a country is good at everything, is good at the two commodities, you find that there is a limitation that no trade takes place, because that's the biggest limitation, and that drives us to the second theory, which was professed by Ricardo. and it came from this theory. It's because there will be no trade. Usually, when one country is better than the other in all things, you don't see if you can sing, if you can cook, if you can do everything at home. Why would you need a second person to be with you? So if you can do everything, why would you need someone else? So the same thing. If a country can produce all the commodities uh, better than the other country, there is no need for trade. But Ricardo comes in with comparative cost advantage. That should be the next video. But for absolute advantage, uh, given two countries producing two commodities using the same level of resources, a country produces more output of both commodities than the other country. And that's the conclusion. So, for reciprocal absolute advantage, given that a country, two countries, and two commodities, of course, one country has advantage in production of in one commodity, and the other has absolute advantage in production of the other commodity. That means there is a reciprocal. One is better than the other in one, and the other takes the other. So the only assumptions, the major assumptions we have, labor is the factor of production, and then we have, it assumes that there should be free trade so that these countries can properly trade with each other, and of course, mobility of factors of production. There should be mobility of factors of production such that labor can freely move within, and this should be inside the country. So thank you very much for listening to me. This theory results into the comparative cost advantage theory. So please watch the next video, and thank you very much for watching this tutorial.